Good morning, good afternoon and good evening, and thank you for watching this slide presentation. It's a slide presentation covering a piece of pre-competitive work between Sci Platform, which is the Sustainable Agriculture Initiative platform, an organisation and platform which brings together food companies to work pre-competitively on the scaling of sustainable agriculture globally. And this is covering the B2B implementation model, which is a joint piece of work with the Dairy Sustainable Framework. My name is David Puddington. I'm the Mars Wrigley Confectionery Director of Sustainable Sourcing, and the reason I'm the narrator of this piece of work is I've been leading this joint collaboration between the Sci Dairy Working Group and the Dairy Sustainability Framework. Right, let's get to the meat of the presentation. So a little bit about the Dairy Sustainability Framework. This is a global initiative put together by the global dairy sector. It has governance, it represents members from around the world, the aggregating members. It has participation from implementing members represented by the major dairy companies from all around the world. And it has an advisory council drawn from retail, social and environmental NGOs, as well as the Food and Agricultural Organisation and the financial sector represented by Rabobank. The purpose of the Dairy Sustainability Framework was to create a global approach to dairy that enabled any dairy enterprise, wherever it was in the world, to start the sustainability journey. Within the framework, there are 11 sustainability themes. This is particularly important to the Sci Platform Dairy Working Group because it aligns very closely with the Sci principles and criteria. In addition, the Dairy Sustainability Framework is driving alignment around the world by working closely with national dairy organisations. It seeks to connect these local and regional activities, and it's focused on continuous improvement. It's a membership approach as well. Free to join is the Dairy Sustainability Framework, but it does expect members to start working on its sustainability journey. So for the Sci Platform, good alignment, global reach and commitment to continuous improvement. So now I'm going to begin to explain why the Sci Dairy Working Group and the Dairy Sustainability Framework began working together in the B2B space. In 2016, the Sci Dairy Working Group had come to a point in time wrestling with how to define and align between dairy buyers and dairy processors what sustainable dairy really looked like. So the Dairy Working Group decided, well, rather than reinvent things, why not make and build on the Dairy Sustainability Framework approach something that could be deployed between businesses, whether you're a dairy buyer or a dairy processor. So this is going beyond the requirements of the Dairy Sustainability Framework membership requirements, but it made a lot of sense because a number of dairy processors were already Dairy Sustainability Framework members and had been on the implementation journey and were also members of the Sci Dairy Working Group. So in early 2017, within the Dairy Working Group in Sci, buyers and processors, again, pre-competitively sat together and said, well, what is it that we both need and want? Both buyers and dairy processors don't want a sustainability journey that would be viewed as greenwashing by external stakeholders. Both buyers and dairy processors want to genuinely demonstrate the journey they are on, particularly buyers keen to see where that journey is for the processor and the processors themselves, want to be able to demonstrate in a consistent fashion to buyers where they are within that journey. And both really key for processors and buyers. Can we demonstrate genuine impact for sustainable dairy and measurable impact as well? And a key feature of the Dairy Sustainability Framework approach is materiality, which you see on the right-hand side of this slide. Now, why is that important? Well, within the 11 themes, if you remember, of the Dairy Sustainability Framework, it actually asks you, as the first step of becoming a member, is do a materiality assessment of what are the themes are material to your dairy enterprise and business. And this is important because as businesses, we realise that there are only finite resources and you can't actually tackle everything all at the same time. Even more importantly, dairy businesses are different across the world. There are different sustainability challenges due to the location of the dairy enterprise. So this enables consistency in approach, working with external stakeholders to prioritise the real priorities within the locally appropriate situation, and underpinning this with a good scientific based approach. It allows priority setting to focus on the really big issues rather than trying to do, say, 11 things at once. And that makes a lot of sense to businesses, and if the materiality assessment is done correctly, it also makes it very clear to external stakeholders where the priorities are, rather than trying to do many things not so well. So key cornerstone of this piece of work. It also avoids a tick box approach to sustainability, which both buyers and producers were really clear on as well, because a tick box approach can lead to auditing for auditing's sake rather than focusing on what are the real sustainability priorities. So this was a good alignment point within the Side Area Working Group. Makes sense, build on the materiality assessment whilst making it relevant within a B2B approach. The other facet that the Side Area Working Group realised, and the Side Area Working Group represents many global food businesses and dairy processors, is that it could link and build on national programmes. As within the Dairy Sustainability Framework, there are national aggregators such as Dairy Australia or the Innovation Centre in the USA, who had already had well-established national programmes focusing on sustainable dairy. So again, pre-competitively within this B2B approach, it made sense that we could build and save time and build efficiency and scale by recognising the national programmes, but equally it allowed the flexibility to recognise individual company programmes on sustainability. So it's a very much a building approach. You could start with a national aggregators sustainability approach, and then the individual companies can build on that, and that's easily recognised within the B2B approach. Science-based, where we're heading is precludes the need for many audits, because one of the aspirations of this piece of work is to have one approach to defining dairy sustainability pre-competitively, and that brings huge efficiencies both for dairy processors and for dairy buyers. And also a key facet of this, as we talked about, recognising company programs and national and regional programs within this model, brings a lot of mutual recognition, and again another efficiency. Okay, so moving on. This slide represents where the Dairy Working Group was prior to 2017, where between dairy buyers and dairy processors, there were many customers setting their own sustainability standards and coming to dairy processors and saying, well, we want to order it to a certain sample size of your farmers, just to see where they are on the journey, which caused a lot of audit fatigue for processors and farmers. For the dairy processors equally, there were customers who had very similar approaches, but slightly different, so it brought a lot of inefficiency for the dairy processors. Equally for the dairy buyers, it was hard for the dairy buyers to tell where exactly are the dairy suppliers on the sustainable journey. They too, as a buyer, they all seem quite similar, but slightly different. So again, this slide is demonstrating the sort of the from state that the dairy working group inside found itself, and was actually where the group wanted to move from. So removal of multiple audits bring efficiency, a single definition of what dairy sustainability could look like, but flexible enough to be appropriate anywhere in the world, and to focus on continuous improvement. So moving on. Another aha moment on this journey within the Dairy Working Group and the Dairy Sustainability Framework, understanding within the B2B model, was to prevent multiple audits of customers on dairy farms. Both dairy processors and dairy buyers realised the most important thing is, can we detect a shift in performance? So we're all interested in continuous improvement. So this slide is showing the bell curve of, say, performance within a population of dairy farmers. And the important thing is, if you can pick up that shift in performance, on average, you don't need to visit every single farmer. This then moves us to a dairy management system approach, and most dairy processors are cooperatives, know their farmers very well, because dairy is built on food safety and quality, and the logistics of milk from farm to dairy processor, which is done at speed. So knowing all the farmers, knowing that the dairy processors know all their farmers, this is a huge shift in thinking, because it meant within the B2B model, if we can establish what the management system is, should be in place based on the 11 themes of sustainability and understanding what are material, then buyers just need to understand that management system which covers all farms, and this precludes the need to go on farm and audit farmers. So brings a huge efficiency for dairy processors, and allows the dairy processors to focus on continuous improvement with their farmers. So moving to this slide, this is the two state within the B2B model approach. So we're taking the 11 themes which are prioritized through a materiality assessment. That is as you would as a normal dairy sustainability framework member. The difference being within the B2B model, this is being deployed specifically between dairy processors and dairy buyers. The focus now becomes on the management system of the dairy processor. So the dairy buyer will then see within the B2B model, okay, we know your dairy management system is credible. We don't need to visit the farmers beyond you. We can just actually begin to understand and hear your explanation of where you are on the sustainability journey, underpinned by your management system. So again, this is bringing a huge amount of efficiency between buyers and processors, and again allowing us pretty competitively to define one approach to dairy sustainability. The B2B model also recognises and builds on programs that are already part of the Dairy Sustainability Framework family. Within the B2B model, these will all be relevant. So again, this allows scale, it prevents reinvention of the wheel, and again, permits focus on continuous improvement with established programs, so that we don't have to start from the beginning again. So again, building on the network that the Dairy Sustainability Framework has already got in place around the world. three elements of the B2B model are a stage matrix which describes the sustainability journey from the start of the journey through to maturity, which means you've moved through a materiality assessment. You have a way of working and execution of that materiality assessment in place back to farm. It also means as you become more mature, you set targets and report publicly and actually assure the overall process as well. The declaration of trust are the proof points, or the control points, which is the assurance model underpinning the matrix. And the B2B report is a simple report which encapsulates all of the journey that a dairy processor is on, which can be shared with their dairy buyer, and will standardize the conversation around where are you on the journey, so that between sales teams and buying teams, it simply becomes a two-page standardized approach that any customer can use, and brings real consistency into not only being able to describe the journey you're on, but also for buyers to accept the journey the dairy processors have been on. So these are the three elements of the B2B model. Again, not a requirement of the Dairy Sustainability Framework membership, but is a piece of work between SciPlatform and the Dairy Sustainability Framework for dairy buyers and dairy processors to enable and develop this B2B model between buyers and processors. We're at a very important stage at the moment. From the end of 2017, we defined the B2B model, developed the Declaration of Trust, the B2B report, and agreed a piloting phase kicking off in February 2018, which will run to the end of 2018, testing a number of pilots in Australia, in Europe and the USA, between buyers and dairy processors. There'll be a calibration at the end of the year, and we're hopeful that with successful pilots, we'll be able to define one approach for dairy sustainability in the B2B space. And during 2019, we'll actually finalise that approach so that it can actually become deployable. This slide just again shows the global nature of the pilots. They're starting in Australia, Europe and the USA, as previously mentioned. And finally, if you'd like to know any more about the work between SciPlatform and the Dairy Working Group and the Dairy Sustainability Framework, please contact Patricia Garcia-Diaz, whose email is here, who is the part of the Secretariat supporting the Dairy Working Group, or Brian Lindsay, who is the Development Director at the Dairy Sustainability Framework and participating as well within the B2B approach. Thank you for listening. I hope that explains the important work that we're doing between Sci and the Dairy Sustainability Framework. It's an exciting time. Hopefully we can move to a single approach for dairy sustainability, focusing on impact and outcome and continuous improvement, and doing it pre-competitively. So thank you for listening.